Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom Shinkley. I am a business advisor. As Sam said, I'm based in Boston. I've worked with Steve Hilliard for many years, and we've worked in the office products industry together for that same period of time. And I'm very sorry he is not here, and that you have to put up with me instead of with him. But I hope that you'll enjoy this anyway. And while Steve's title for his presentation was the state of the industry, of the office products industry, I changed the title a little bit to industry obsolescence, crisis, or opportunity. I've written about this subject. Keep in mind that before 3 days ago, by 8 or 9 o'clock at the time, I didn't know I was going to be here. I didn't have a presentation, so I had to put a lot of stuff together. And so bear with me a little bit, but I hope that the theme of what I'm going to say resonates with you nonetheless. So when you look at the last 6 months, for example, and you look at seemingly unrelated events that are taking place in different parts of the world within a short period of time, within the office products industry, in the broader context, and if you take a bird's eye view of that, you see something like this. The president of Hewlett-Packard announces plans to lay off 15,000 employees within the next 12 months. Similar layoffs are planned or underway by all major hard copy printer manufacturers worldwide. Then you see a seemingly totally unrelated event happening in the news, and it is that the United States Postal Service announces that effectively the first week of August 2013, there will be no more Saturday deliveries. At the same time, all 3 global players in the office products industry reseller community report sluggish sales and announce layoffs domestically, but especially in various parts of their international markets. And then you also see that the largest shareholder in one of the publicly held office products reseller companies invites the chairman to embark on an aggressive program of store closings and restructuring. That's peculiar. And then all at the same time, the Australian government announces that by 2015, more than 12% of all their employees will be working from home for at least part of the work week. And then a month later, the German Office Furniture Manufacturers Association reports that the demand for office furniture is in decline, not only domestically, but also in export markets. Fast forward 3 or 4 weeks, 2 of the world's leading paper companies, Finland's UPM Kymmene and Stora Enso, are studying a merger of 2 equals to help the global paper industry worldwide overcome structural issues in their industry. Fast forward again a couple of weeks, Logitech, the Swiss manufacturer of computer accessories, reports a 23% decline in revenues. More or less at the same time, Echo Brands report sales declines in all 3 of their reporting divisions. And then in the wake of strong regulatory opposition a few months ago, the agreement between Avery Dennison and 3M regarding the sale of Avery's office products division to 3M was called off because of the Federal Trade Commission. 2 months later, CCL of Toronto announced that it is making the deal instead. When you look at these seemingly unrelated events, you come to ask yourself the question, what's the problem here? What is the problem with all these companies? Is it the euro? Is it the dollar? Is it Greece? Is it Cyprus? Is it the US Congress with the Postal Service, for example, or the unions? Or global warming? Or is it the recession or the business cycle? Or is it inflation or deflation? What is it? What is the problem that combines all these companies? Or is there one? Is there a common denominator amongst these seemingly unrelated and disparate events And if so, what is it? My sense, folks, is that what all these events connects, it's not the digital age, it's the digital age phase 2. What's phase 1? Phase 1 is the digital age we all have embraced already. It is computer, desktop, and laptop technology combined with the internet and combined with printer technology. We all have done that already. We're there. We're already way into the digital age phase 1. But what about this phase 2? Phase 2, social media, cloud communication, and smartphone technology combined create a whole new world of working and living and communicating that many of us have not fully grasped as yet. Phase 2, for example, the cloud communication industry consists of a cluster of companies, of about 150 companies, mostly North American, but also from the Far East and from Europe, but mostly North American, that are hell-bent on changing your life and mine and everyone's. It's a very large industry, it's very rapidly growing, and they are making headway into all aspects of society with a breakneck speed. Smart telephony, we all use it in some way already. And of course, the social media revolution is taking the world by storm. So the digital age phase 2 is the confluence of hard and soft technologies that allow human beings everywhere to create, share, record, and store information of all kinds, voice, data, video in digital form. And this confluence of hard and soft technologies has 3 spectacularly important characteristics. First of all, it reduces, if not eliminates, a lot of costs. It's very inexpensive. It eliminates barriers, obstacles, middlemen, gatekeepers, not facilitators, mind you, that's a different thing. But gatekeepers are on the way out in many cases. It's addictive to anyone and everyone who adopts it into their lives, business and personal, wherever you go. And it marginalizes anyone and everyone who ignores it. It creates a profound adaptive challenge to all players, large and small, global and local, corporate and independent, that operate legacy business models that were created and matured in the pre-digital age. So what business models are affected? Manufacturing, retailing in all forms, travel agencies, recruiting agencies, real estate, banking, bookstores, publishing, entertainment, music, office work, accounting, photography, you name it, stock brokerages, you name it. It's just a short list here. So if you take these developments and you come to the realization that this digital age phase 2 forces us to adapt, the question could be asked, what would that mean for the office products industry? Let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, for years and years and years, for 3 decades at least, the office products industry has lived on the commonly accepted observation that it grew and developed based on the growth of the services sector. And with that also was growing the white-collar employment year after year after year. And that growth was always higher than the economy on average. So the white-collar employment was always outgrowing the economy by a factor of 1 or 2%. And indeed, if you look from 1982 to about 2007, 2008, that is indeed the case. And everybody knew that, everybody looked at the figures, and all of a sudden, something changed. All of a sudden, it began to level off in various industries, in professional business, financial, education, information, except for education and health. That's the only sector of this category of companies that still continues to grow after 2008. Here's another example of government employment, state, federal, and local. And there you again can see that around 2009, 2008, 2009, it started to level off, and it's been down a little bit. In retailing, the same thing. Construction, the same thing. You can see this is the retail bar from 72 to about 2008. Year after year after year, that sector was a source of growth in employment. And then it leveled off. And even more astonishingly, for years we've had an increase in the number of lawyers and law firms, and that is leveling off too. And today we have fewer lawyers than we had in 2008. That's pretty amazing that all of that is suddenly changing. And now back to the United States Postal Service. What is exactly the problem? Why did they want to stop deliveries on Saturday? As I said before, we had very often when you talk with people about the Postal Service and the problems it has, very often they blame, half the people blame Congress, the other half blame the labor unions. A few years ago, they appointed a new Postmaster General, and he approached the problem a little bit differently. He took a piece of paper and he started to calculate and ask the people in his organization, what is really the core of our profitability? How do we make our money? And fairly quickly he discovered that one activity in particular was very profitable, very important and very profitable to the Postal Service. And what was it? Sending invoices to people who owe money and people sending a check back to the people where the money belonged. In 2003, the Postal Service sent 50 billion envelopes in that category. And everybody knew, intuitively, the rank and file, everybody knew, that's our bread and butter. Where does that 50 billion envelopes stand today, in 2013? How about 20? So from 50 billion envelopes to 20 billion envelopes in 10 years, times 40 cents, that's a lot of money. Why the decline? You and I are changing our way of paying bills. There is a spectacular consumer behavior change taking place that leaves big gaping holes in a lot of organizations. That's why I wanted to use this example. And that hits home the point that this digital age phase 2 is having an incredible impact on consumer behavior and user behavior. So the future of work is subject to spectacular change as well. I don't have to tell you that. And from cubicle to sitting somewhere in a meadow with your mobile phone or whatever it is, where you get all your work done. In my own little example, for example, to be able to respond to Steve Hilliard and to come here and make a presentation and make all the changes and all that stuff, before the digital age, I would never have been able to do it. It took me 5 seconds to make the changes. So what we're discussing here is three-dimensional change. We see demographics changing, we see consumer behavior changing, and we see spectacular technological changes that are all working together to change our lives. This is really a complicated way of saying that in the office products industry, chances are you have fewer customers. The customers that you have buy less, and they have more choices where they can buy. That's three-dimensional change, and whenever that happens, I have a tendency to raise the alert with everybody. When there's three-dimensional change, you have to really address it in a different way. The challenge to adapt is with us in a very spectacular way. For example, we know already that the 3 office superstores that we are so familiar with all have announced that they're closing stores. So if you project that forward into 2017, and you're very modest about it, we only close 20 stores, 20, 30, 40 stores each every year, you come to a point that by 2017, we have as many stores as we had in 2002. That is, if you are modest about it, and if you assume that the consumers are not going to change their behavior in a more aggressive way than just piecemeal every year. So if you're a manufacturer and you look at this chart and you look at what you've been doing for the last 10, 20 years with the superstores, you have grown with them as they've opened stores. Your volume went up, your number of customers went down, but your volume went up. Probably your margins went down over the years. Certainly if you take the same perspective as the Postmaster General and you go back to 2003 and you look at where you were, and now 10 years later you're at a different spot. Now what's going to happen in the next 5 years? What does that mean for you? So when that three-dimensional change process takes place, where do you start trying to get your arms around an adaptive strategy? And what I'm suggesting is that you ask yourself rather rigorously, what business are you in? Very often when I ask that question from people, very often they have a tendency to give me a functional description of what they do. You go to Barnes & Noble, they say, we sell books. Or you go to a grocery store, yeah, we sell food. Okay. Or office supplies. Or we manufacture manila file folders. Or we manufacture and market envelopes. You get the point. It's a functional description of what they do. Another way of thinking about it is what you really are doing if you're in charge of a company is you're in the business of creating value propositions for customers with whom you've had a good and positive relationship for many years. So it is not a functional description, it's a value proposition. And that value proposition not is what you think it is what your customer perceives it to be. And our customers define what value propositions they prefer, and we adapt accordingly. So if your customers change, you need to adapt. And you need to get a fix on how they perceive your value proposition in comparison with the choices they have. So what I'm really going to do is I'm going to turn this whole thing upside down, and I'm going to translate it into a whole bunch of questions that you can ask and should be asking in terms of your own challenge, your own adaptive challenge to get your arms around digital age phase 2. What assumptions are we making about the business model we presently operate? What technologies are changing the way our customers shop for our services and our products? How will especially our younger customers adapt to changing market conditions? And what does this mean for our relationship with them? What is our value proposition from their perspective? How do we need to adapt to continue to engage them in a meaningful way? What technologies can we embrace to create new value propositions? And especially, this is personally my all-time favorite, it's a very good way to start, what analytical information do we have or do we need about our business to focus our energies in the correct market segments? So this analytical issue, the issue of analytics, I'll come back to over again. So let's do a practice run on the business. What business are you in? Say, for example, maybe many of you are familiar with a company called AT Cross. What business are they in? Writing instrument? Fair enough. Well, it so happens that after the recession of 2003, they also decided to go into the eyewear business. So now the question is, are they in the eyewear business? In a way they are, but in a better way, what the business they are in is they appeal to consumers that seek to enhance their image, and we facilitate their lifestyle. And they do this with two little categories: One is the 80 cross pen. It does indeed enhance your lifestyle. That's why people buy it. And these glasses and goggles for skiing and all that type of stuff, that is also profiled to enhance the lifestyles of consumers. That's what they do. They seek to enhance their image and facilitate their lifestyles. It has nothing to do with pens, and has nothing to do with goggles or Googles or frames or glasses or anything. So that's the business you're in. And then be smart about it. What I've noticed many, many times, and especially the last couple of years, while we have in the office products industry very, very large companies that have really become global and dominant players in the industry, much smaller players in that industry actually perform, in terms of profitability and capital productivity and so forth, perform better than some of the very large ones. And I got to thinking about how is this possible? So in some cases I've had a chance to really drill into that question. Why is it that in an industry that is really dominated at the reseller level, for example, by 3 players, why is it that wherever you look, North America, Europe, wherever you go, you can find pockets of companies that are performing, that get, for example, an 8, 9, 10% EBITDA, that get a GMROI that far exceeds the ones of number 2 and number 3, that get labor productivity rates of $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 per employee. There is no way that some of the global players achieve that too. How is that possible? What distinguishes those companies? And I've concluded that, and I call it smart business models, that smart business models have 5 components. The first component is a common denominator between all these companies is there's a lot of curious learning going on and sharing of knowledge and information. There's naturally some investment, and then there is a high degree of innovation. But below that, there are 2 elements that I really want to flesh out a little bit. One is setting limits, and the other is raising the bar to new extremes. Perhaps it sounds a little bit mysterious or maybe theoretical to you, so let me flesh it out a little bit. In a company, you can set limits along all kinds of different dimensions. Obviously, assortment, obviously the types of people that you want to bring into the organization. You can set limits on the types of reseller arrangements, and you can set limits on the type of innovation that you want to achieve. And there's a whole bunch more, but this illustrates the point. Raising the bar to new extremes has also a whole variety of examples where you can do that. You can do that in creating an identity, for example. Or you can do it by embracing certain types of technology, or by pricing, or customer service, or especially, and very importantly to many people, analytics. I find that very often smart business models come out of some sort of a crisis, and all of a sudden they became, because of the crisis, became much more interested in the numbers than before. So they started to really crunch away at the numbers, not just sales, not just gross profit, but really drilling it down to the activity costs that are associated with some activities and not with others, and really beginning to understand their business in a different way. And those companies, as the first almost like entrepreneurial instinct, by embracing this new knowledge that they had all along but didn't pay attention to, raising the bar to new extremes with analytics very often helps define the way forward. Product variety is another example. So let me give you a couple of examples in manufacturing and in distribution and in services to illustrate the point. In the plastics business, you have a whole bunch of companies, and all of them are, not all, but many of them are a little bit stuck with their distribution channels and with their business models. And there's a company in the UK called Really Useful Products that is in that business and also in that business and competing with everybody. And contrary to the experience of many of their peers, they grow by leaps and bounds. In Europe, in Asia, in North America. Why? First of all, they set very, very strict limits on what types of boxes they make. And then within that very strict limit, they raise the bar in terms of variety and choice and twists and turns in terms of innovation within that very tight core that captures the attention of buyers from every mass merchandising organization that you can imagine. It's the strangest thing. And the other thing is they're very quick to do this. They have an idea in January, in March it's ready, it's on the shelf. What the competitors takes 6 to 9 months to a year and a half, they manage to accomplish within 2 or 3 months. So very quick turnarounds. Just an example. Let me give you another example of a company that was in a state of crisis a few years ago. The company is called Sure Tech Brands. I don't know if you know them. They're in Cleveland, Ohio. For a long time they were owned by a German company and they were totally distracted by strategic planning. Everything was strategy and it was all here and then there, German strategy, American strategy. They could never agree on anything. So they decided to separate, to take the company out of the German company's hands, and they saw a very steep decline in sales, and then they made a, I would say, rather dramatic change in their strategy. They set very strict limits. They were in duct tape, literally, D-U-C-T tape. Totally mundane, ridiculous product. Who could possibly make money with it? And a whole bunch of other products. And they decided to first limit their assortment, and then within that assortment create a whole variety of brands that appeal to the colleges around the United States. So now, rather than going to the shelves of the mass merchandisers, they went to the college stores, kind of a direction, change of direction. They raised the prices, and then on top of that, they did something else. They created a website, and they created a social media strategy that really managed to engage the users of these products. And to my mind, how is it even possible? But within a year and a half, they got 1.5 million likes on Facebook. Okay? How do you do that with such a mundane product? If you don't mind me saying that, it just, this is astonishing. So if you take the top social networks, you categorize them by who gets the most clicks on the social media. This duct tape company is number 61 out of 100. Pardon?
Just behind Walmart.
Exactly.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. The point I'm making is setting limits on one side and raising the bar to a new extreme on another, especially embracing today's technologies, worked out for them in a splendid way. I must grant you, they're very creative about it, they're very passionate about their products, and that's where that creature, you have to really give that a lot of passion and a lot of creativity, but focus on it until you're there. And to my way of thinking, this is a classic example of how a legacy company with really mundane products embraced 21st century digital age phase 2 technology and really got themselves out of the crisis. Their sales, as I told you, when they were owned by a German company, their sales went down, and now they're rising double digit year after year. So manufacturing, is there a renaissance? Yes, but in a different way from what we're used to. We get micro-manufacturing, lean manufacturing, just-in-time, on-demand or by-the-drink manufacturing, iPhone-directed manufacturing at some point, robotics-driven, etc. So we are already seeing a renaissance in manufacturing, but it's a very different environment. And in the wake of all these store closings that I showed you with the big box retailers, the question now comes, is there something like a renaissance going on for small box retailing? My own sense is that you see that already happening while we observe the landscape. In food retailing, you see Aldi, you see Trader Joe's, you see a company called Batteries Plus, I'll get back to that. Staples print shops. If you look at the capital productivity of a Staples print shop and you compare it to all the other stores, it's a phenomenal, that's the way forward. 5,000 square foot store. Office Depot is experimenting with a small footprint. Office Max the same. In pet supplies you see a company called Unleashed that is experimenting and actually successfully with small stores. Ace Hardware is doing it. In Sweden there's a whole chain of about 400 stores called Office Warehouse, but they're small stores. Ryman in the UK, Bureau Valet in France, all of these are characteristics of a wave of small store retailing that is really very interesting. And here is an example of, another example of digital age phase 2 type technology combined with small store retailing. It's a company called Batteries Plus. If anybody asks you, would you like to build a business model around batteries, you probably look at them. Are you crazy? You can find batteries everywhere. Walmart sells the batteries at a lower cost than I can buy them. So why would I even begin to get involved in that? Well, Batteries Plus approached it in a very different way. The first thing they said, we're going to set limits on what we do. We only sell batteries. It's clear as a bell. But then we're going to raise the bar of what we do to a whole new extreme. How? They discovered that there is a huge aftermarket for legacy equipment from the 1990s on to today. All kinds of consumer equipment, business equipment, government equipment, military, medical equipment, and all that equipment runs on batteries. So what they did is they made an inventory, a database. They created a database of every battery you can possibly imagine. It came to 40,000. They put them in the computer, and now what are they selling? Are they selling batteries or are they selling knowledge? What is it? They flipped it around. They turned the tide against them rather than competing against Walmart. Walmart competes against them. That is changing the rules of the game in your favor. So now anybody that has a legacy equipment and that needs a battery, you call them, they find the source, the specifications, the prices, and they deliver it, whatever you order, 95, 98% of the time, next day before 10 o'clock. That's pretty cool. So what you have here is a retail concept, small box retail, that has woven into it all the technologies that we know today. From the web, databases, communicating with customers via email, blogging, marketing via blog, etc. So Batteries Plus. On a more mundane level, companies like Ace Hardware and True Value, I think many of you are familiar with the names. There's similar companies in Canada. Basically hardware stores, basically legacy companies, mostly family owned. And you would say that with the presence of very powerful players in, for example, the building materials business, like the Home Depots and companies like that, you would be forgiven to believe that there is no room left for companies like Ace or True Value Hardware. And yet, when you look at what they have done to cope with all that competition that built up over the years, they embraced social media, they embraced the digital age phase 2 in a spectacularly interesting way, where rather than going global or national with their advertising campaigns, they went the exact opposite. They went local. They have extremely local television advertisements where the local store managers show up on TV, and at the same within a radius of 3 miles, and they have a web-based strategy and an emailing and blogging strategy that focuses on the population of in the immediate radius of these stores. And they penetrate, and it works, especially with the younger generation. So they support their local independent dealers with social media programs tailored to their specific locations. And they round out these TV and radio advertisements with Facebook likes, with email offers, and all designed to connect with the new generation. So small box retailing, a renaissance, yes, but in a different way. Web-enabled, knowledge-driven, business process, outsourced very often, services-oriented, and high-value add. Now, I also promised to give you an example of a 21st century digital age phase 2 company in the services sector. And that company has embraced social media and cloud communication in a way that I feel you may find very, very interesting. The company is called Supporting Strategies, and they do, again, they provide a ridiculously mundane service, outsourced bookkeeping. Let me ask you, how could you possibly make money and be competitive with outsourced bookkeeping? There are tons of people that do it, and yet this woman who started it, who's now 38, 39, started about 7 years ago, and she came out of a crisis with her previous employer where she was rendering bookkeeping services for that employer, and she said, I'm going to do this in a very different way. And the first thing she said, I'm going to set limits on the people I hire. Remember that smart business model, the limits? What people does she hire? Any idea where I'm going? MBA moms who are in their 30s, who have maybe 1 or 2 kids, have an excellent education, know a lot about finance, but they don't have 60 hours a week available for a career. They have 25 hours available. So what she does, she trains them with exact standards. This is how I want these books to be done. These are the standards. Then she sends them home. They sit behind their computer. She sends the information that she gets from her clients to them. They do the bookkeeping, and they send it at the end of the day to where? To the cloud. Why? Because at the end of the day, the customer, the client, now can see on his or her iPhone her or his profit and loss statement and his or her balance sheet, always on, always accurate, always readily available. That is a cool strategy, and that's a cool service too. And what is the impact of that service on the clients? By working this way, having these MBA moms working 24 hours, 25 hours a week, and whatever time during the day they have, if they want to work from 3 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, who cares? Or 9 o'clock at night to 12, who cares? Doesn't matter, as long as the work gets done. This woman saves her clients up to 40% in their bookkeeping costs. So they're growing by leaps and bounds. They have about 200 customers. They just rolled out a franchising organization with which they want to grow throughout the United States. And to my way of thinking, this is a vivid example of how you can embrace all these technologies in phase 2 of the digital age and weave them into your business models. Some companies weave them into old business, legacy business models, like Ace Hardware. Others create completely new ones. And I also think that if you start digging into this, you will find hundreds and hundreds of companies like this all over the place. So, taking a 5-year look forward, and taking a 5-year forward-looking perspective on the future of the office products industry, and placing it in the context of smart business models, one can ask the question, what does that mean for the industry? And my feeling is that we get 4 categories of companies. And I know that a lot of you are very concerned about the industry or very on high alert about where everything is going. I also have to say I'm seeing a lot of innovations taking place. There's a lot of trial and error taking place in all kinds of different ways, and some of that is going to stick. And some companies have already figured out that this is the direction to go. So what I think is we have 4 categories. The first category is consists of companies that are uniquely positioned to take advantage of the changes that are taking place today, of the 3-dimensional changes that are taking place today. They have smart business models and they're ready for the 21st century. Then there's a second category of companies that need to calibrate 1 or 2 specific aspects of their business models to stay ahead of the game. That could be the product market matrix, it could be business processes, it could be analytics. I love to begin with analytics. I think that is really where the answers begin. Technology and others. And then there's a third category of companies, and that is the group that needs to reinvent themselves in a rather major way. It can be done if they are on top of things, but it's a problem. And then the fourth category, too slow, too late, and they may unfortunately end up in the dustbin of history. To summarize, during periods of multidimensional change, correctly defining what business you're in matters. Like Batteries Plus, are we in the business of selling batteries? No, we're in the business of offering knowledge. That's a different story. The digital age matters, phase 2 matters, embracing smart business models matters. It matters in all aspects of retailing and services, and it matters in all aspects of manufacturing. It matters to all of us. I want to thank you very much for putting up with me, and I hope that the theme I had for you resonates to some extent, and I really appreciate being with you.